All right, let me introduce another component from the data dashboard. Again, the data dashboard takes the data from the CardioMetabolic profile or a metabolic efficiency profile and uses that information not only to give you some benchmarks and to help set up some training parameters, but also so that you can strategize and what I call tinker with the data and come up with some ideas or strategies for different types of training and diet concerns. Specifically on this little tutorial here, I want to talk about endurance fuel strategies. So this particular sheet is the CMP fuel sheet, and what we have is the ability to look at the carbohydrate burn rate per minute at different levels of intensity as determined from the CardioMet profile exercise test. And then how do we use that information to maybe come together with some type of strategy for especially longer endurance type events that you may be training for or part of your training may entail. So for example, in this sheet we can look at both the bike if you do a bike test and the treadmill if you do a treadmill test. So for multi-sport endurance athletes, we can look at both profiles. These different rates of calorie expenditure, specifically carbohydrate expenditure, can be different between the two at different relative intensities. So how do we use the sheet? Basically, you can see here during the CardioMet profile, we see all of our calorie per minute, specifically the carbohydrate calorie per minute versus the heart rate. So I can click on my little chart here and then kind of swing through here and get different. Here's a heart rate at 135 with the carbohydrate, CHO stands for carbohydrate, the carbohydrate calorie per minute. So at 135 beats a minute, this individual's burning about 11.5 calories of carbohydrates per minute. Now, why is that important? Obviously, the carbohydrates, specifically the kind of carbohydrates you find in your glycogen stores in the muscle and in the liver, they're your limiting source as far as fuel for long endurance events. So we don't worry about fat running out, but we do worry about carbohydrates running out during long events. So if you're at high intensities, you're going to have higher carbohydrate burn rate, and that can be a problem depending on the distance and the amount of fuel you're able to take in, or the time and the amount of fuel you're able to take in. So here's how we can tinker around and just get an idea of a pace or a carbohydrate need intake per hour based off of where the intensity is. So for example, if we're at about 140 beats a minute on the heart rate, and this is riding the bike, that's just about 11.5 to 12 calories. So I can just plug this in. 140 is the heart rate, and what did we say? Let's do that again. Yeah, so it's about 11, let's say 11.5. So we're just, again, it's not written in stone, it's just an estimate, but it gives us a good ballpark and something smart to work with. So for example, if I'm at that intensity for this individual that's kind of a moderate to high level, 140 beats per minute, then, and let's say I was going about 4 hours on the bike at that intensity. So that's 240 minutes. I'm not taking any carbohydrates in. And I'm running into problems at the end of the 4 hours because here the carbohydrate fuel is negative. So we're predicting how many stored carbohydrate calories we have in glycogen is 2206. And now we have a negative 554 based off of this scenario for right around 140 beats a minute. So we can take in fuel though. For most of us we can take up to 240. Some of us can train to even take in more, 240 calories per hour. So in that scenario, even if I'm taking in that kind of goal level of carbohydrate intake, at this intensity I'm still on I am not negative. I'm 406 positive, but again, because this isn't exact science necessarily, because there's lots of variables that can affect the outcomes, but we're going to be kind of in a little bit of a red zone still because we're less than 500 calories left in the tank. So we can play around with this. We can either lower the intensity if it's a longer and we want to have fuel. We don't have to take in as much fuel, and that'll help us, or we can try and train our bodies to tolerate maybe a little bit more. So we get 280, now we're above that 500. So again, you can take the CardioMet profile information and tinker around and come up with some scenarios as far as fueling requirements. Same thing with the treadmill. The way we combine this for ultra distance is if we do have data from both tests, you have to have two separate tests. We can have say a strategy here on the bike side for, let's say this is an Ironman and we have a 110 mile bike ride. Usually that's going to be around the aerobic threshold as far as a goal effort level. So let's just say for this individual it's around 125 beats a minute, and that's about 9.5 carbohydrate calories per minute. And what I say that was 125 on the heart rate. So, and then if we're able to take in 240 calories or more, we're doing pretty well as far as carbohydrates left in the tank. We can take in a little bit more, get a little bit more reserve. Now this 966 theoretically is what we have left for the run. So I can go over here on the bike, use this data from on the run, use the leftover from the bike 966 here, and then play the same scenarios out over on this side. So let's say the aerobic threshold on the run's 130 beats a minute, or a specific pace that's correlated to that. And let's say that's about 10 calories per minute when we're looking at the numbers. Then that's going to be a net loss of 840. So that would be good if we were only doing, here we're going to use this as, let's say, a 5-hour marathon. And that's not good even if we were just doing a marathon. Right here we have 966, and based off of this left in the tank, not the 2079, we are at a negative 834 calories. So this strategy for this individual would not be appropriate if he was running the race tomorrow. Obviously some of these training adaptations can take place, and we would adjust this so that there was enough fuel in the tank for the run. So we'd have to lower that intensity on the bike. But you can see how this works. You can tinker with this information and come up with a strategy of your own for your event, and you'll kind of have a better idea what you need to do. We also offer a test called the Metabolic Efficiency Profile, which is similar to the CardioMet profile, except we just test you on the low end, more identifying what goes on your zone 2 type level of intensity, where you'd be on some of these ultra distances events. And what we try and do is average this out over a 5-minute period. So here we have different power outputs, and instead of doing a ramping protocol as we did in the CMP, which is only a minute at each stage, now we have 5 minutes at some of the intensities we figure would be in zone 2, where we would do an ultra distance. So we can average those out for each of those stages. Here at 140 watts, now we have 5 calories per minute of carbohydrate. And we can work out the same scenarios, but maybe a little bit more accurate as far as putting together a strategy for your ultra distance type of event. So again, this is your endurance fuel strategy based off of the CardioMet or metabolic efficiency profiles.